Welcome, everybody. So my name's Rosanne Essiambre, and I'm a change agent coach and change management and continuous improvement consultant and founder of Sustainable Solutions Coaching and Consulting. So I've been the change agent for 20 years, working on a variety of transformations across a diverse set of industries, both domestically and internationally. So IT is one side of the transformations that I've done. I've certainly done a lot of back office transformations as well from a process perspective. And I help change agents and departments be seen, be heard, and be effective in bringing about change in the organization and sometimes their personal lives as well. And as Pepe said, this is going to be an interactive session this evening. So as you see in the bullets here, we're going to be doing some practicing and going into the breakout rooms, getting some feedback and learning some different levels of listening. So with that, all right, so tonight we're going to be talking about leveling up your listening skills. As far as the game plan for this evening, so we are going to talk about why listening matters. We are going to be practicing listening. So we'll start with some practice after we talk about why listening matters. Then we're going to go into what level 1 listening is, and we'll go into what level 2 listening is. And then we're going to go back and practice once we have some additional ideas on how we can listen. We'll learn level 3 listening, go back and practice once again. And after all of this practice and learning the different levels of listening, at that point, hopefully we can summarize up what listening is, and we'll do a wrap up. So as far as why listening matters. So for effective communication, what do you want to do first? Do you want to understand first, or do you want to be understood first? You can put it into the chat or you can say it out loud. What do you think? Okay, Maggie says understand first. Okay, lots of people saying understand. Okay, we have an understood first. Chicken, egg in the chicken. Yeah. Okay, so you want to understand first. As Stephen Covey puts it, this is one of the principles and keys to effective interpersonal communication. So that's the first reason why listening matters. We want to seek to understand first, and the way we're going to do that is through listening. Now, what are we showing people when we listen to them? Great, fantastic, right off the bat. So Cara and Marla nailed it. So we are showing, oh good, so we have some additions here. Paying attention, yep. We're showing interest, good. Empathy, yes. Lori, yes, we're showing them they matter. Yes, that's huge. So absolutely, respect is one of the things that we are showing people when we are listening to them and what they have to say. And you guys are correct. We're also paying attention. We're also demonstrating empathy depending on how we're listening. We're showing we're interested in learning about them, and all of that boils down to respect for the other individual. So that's the second reason why listening matters. Now, how much does a person always want a solution when they're speaking and sharing? Okay, we got sometimes, not always. We have only when they ask. Yeah, Sheena, good. Don't assume they want a solution. Yep. Okay, we have rarely. Sometimes it depends. Yes, so good. So sometimes all a person wants when they are sharing or unloading, they simply want somebody to hear them and they're looking for an empathetic ear. And sometimes just listening to the person can be a huge comfort to that individual. So if they're simply looking for a sounding board or looking for that empathetic ear, and we go off right away with, well, here's how you can solve that, or here's what I'd recommend, that can be a really big turnoff to the person speaking because that isn't what they're looking for. So we always want to keep in mind they may or may not be looking for a solution. It's important to ask. Okay, so that's a third reason why listening matters. It's one of the ways we can comfort people. People listen with the intent to understand, or do they listen with the intent to reply? Okay, we have a guess of most people listen to understand. Yeah, Lauren says most people love to reply. Okay. Intent to have time to reload. That's certainly what some people are doing. Absolutely. One says, my husband wants to reply. Yeah, Barb, it can be hard not to reply. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So as you guys are predicting here into the chat, most people listen with the intent to reply instead of with the intent to understand. And because that is what most people are doing, that's why Carl Rogers has this quote around, we think we listen, but very rarely do we listen with real understanding and true empathy. Yet when we can listen at this level, it's a very potent force for change. And having been a change agent for 20 years and watching the different levels of listening that go on in corporate and business, I can definitely agree with Carl Rogers on this. It can make a huge difference in the interaction with a client or a coworker, depending on how well we're listening. In addition to this, Lee Iacocca has been quoted as saying, I only wish I could find an institute that teaches people how to listen. Business people need to listen at least as much as they need to talk, and too many people fail to realize real communication goes in both directions. Now, what does listening build with the other person? Trust, rapport, yep, shared experience, connection, empathy, ooh, safety. And what are we doing when we're building those things with a person? What are we building between each other? Yeah, there you go, Manwai. We're building the relationship and we're building the connection, as some people are saying, in bonds. Yes, absolutely. So listening is key to building relationships. And in addition to that, it's key to resolving conflict. So anywhere that conflict is going on, whether it's in your family or whether it's at work, that's a signal true listening isn't happening. Now, it isn't always the case, but a lot of times where there's conflict, there's a lack of listening that's going on. Okay, so listening is a really, really key skill. So questions and comments on why listening matters before we go and do some practice. Sounds like everybody's good. All right. So now let's do a little bit of practicing. So we're going to be put into breakout rooms of 2 people for 6 minutes. And thank you in advance, Pepe, for your help with this. So once you're in the room, decide who's going to be role A and who's going to be role B. Role A, you're going to choose the work situation where you're frustrated with someone, and avoid sharing any background on that situation with your partner, and have a conversation with your partner to resolve the frustration as if it's the person you're frustrated with. And role B, your job is to role play with role A in the conversation. Okay. Questions on the exercise before we go into the breakout rooms?
Is the person in role B supposed to be making it easy for the role A person, or is the person supposed to be not really communicative and resistant?
Good question, and it is your choice.
So question role A, when you're frustrated with someone, is that someone role B?
So it is a real life situation you have at work right now, and you are going to role play with role B like they are the person you're frustrated with.
Yeah, so
that
you treat role B as that someone, and role B is
correct?
supposed to, okay, got it.
Correct.
Do we need chat or the chat boxes windows? I don't have my chat window, or I haven't been able to see any of the chatting for some reason. Do we need that for the breakout?
That you do not need it for the breakout. I
Okay.
am going to put the exercise into the chat room just so if anybody wants to be able to see that. I don't know why you cannot see the chat at the moment.
After the exercise, might switch computers.
Might be the case. Thank you, Sherry, for already putting that in there. Okay, any other questions before we go in?
So we're going to spend 6 minutes going one direction. It's not as if we're going to split 50-50.
It's a conversation. So it is up to the 2 of you how that conversation is going to flow, and role A will start it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Pepe, go ahead and put us in. Have a good conversation, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. All right. So now that we have had a chance to practice.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, now that we have had a chance to practice, so there is a poll up on your screen, hopefully now, if you can then complete that and answer the questions. Give everybody a minute to do that, and then we will share the results and talk about them. Okay, and is everyone able to see the poll on the screen? Okay,
Yes.
good. I'm seeing nodding of heads. Okay, so it looks like in the first exercise, so it was about 50-50 on whether role A felt heard and satisfied with the conversation. And when I say 50-50, 50% felt satisfied, 50% sort of felt satisfied, and there was definitely one that was no in there. Now, role B, whether they felt heard and satisfied, 50-50 again. Yes, 50% sort of. On the did your partner interrupt you at any point in the conversation? So this is good. Only 5% were interrupting. 50% were no. And when I say 50%, again, this is a little bit skewed because of the role A versus role B. So there's the not applicable for role B. As far as whether role A kept the conversation focused on you, so this is good. Quite a few did keep it focused on role A. There were some that turned the conversation to themselves. And whether role A, whether their partner asked any clarifying questions. So some did, and there were some that did not. So any comments or surprises in seeing these results?
I think I found the listening part is like, what are we listening for? Is the person that initiates the conversation, they have a subject, but the person that hears it may be thinking that it's a different subject. And so, you know, in my case, the person wanted to talk about being introduced to a team, to talk about an effort. And I'm thinking about that effort as well, but I'm thinking about it from my perspective, not necessarily from her perspective. So we think we're both talking about the same thing, but it's slightly nuanced. So we're making an effort to talk and communicate, but we're coming at it from different perspectives.
So great awareness there. So thinking we're talking about the same thing, and actually it can be kind of ships crossing in the night if we're not confirming we're actually talking about the same thing. Great observation.
So Kara brings up a good point in the chat. She said less interruptions than in the real world, and I think that's because we are being like hyper focused on what we're doing here, right? But when we're like in our actual meeting or ceremony, it doesn't play out that way necessarily. And I think that's when the real work of your training your brain comes in. Because here it's pretty easy, you know, it's like one-on-one, you know what the assignment is, you're doing the assignment. But in the real world, it's a much more difficult thing.
Yes. So
I was going to contribute that something similar, that is a control experiment. And in the real world, there are more emotions that contribute to that kind of eagerness to respond. But great observation, Maria.
yes, both of those are great observations. So one, the more distractions there are going on in our environment, the harder it can be to listen. And Pepe, absolutely, the more emotions you have going on inside of you, the harder it can be to listen. And when you're frustrated, you're already in an emotional state with somebody. And like you said, yes, this is a controlled experiment. And absolutely, it can play out differently in the real world where those situations are coming into play. Good observations. Anything else?
I'll jump in and say that in addition to this being very controlled, there were only two people involved in this conversation. Many times, I'd say most times in my work at least, it's not two people, it's 4, it's 6, it's 8, which putting 8 people in a room to have a conversation, I think is nuts. But to me, that should be a presentation. It's really hard, especially with Zoom, to have 8 people in a conversation. But I think the 2 did give us some great examples of the challenge. But when I stopped to think about multiplying this to the real world, I'm like, no wonder I am not good at this, or don't like this, or find this too challenging, and tell people, just write it down, because I can't.
It's too much coming in at the same time, it sounds like. Yeah. So great awareness there as well. The more players involved in the conversation, the more that it's going to take skill-wise for that listening skill to come to the table. All right, so great observations, everybody. Okay, so coming back to presentation here. Great, move past this. We've talked about the poll. So now let's talk about some of the different levels of listening. So first, we're going to talk about level 1, which is called subjective listening. This is listening based on the agenda or needs of the listener. Rarely does it satisfy the person who is speaking. And the majority of everyday listening occurs at this level. So this is why when we saw the poll from the previous exercise, there was a big chunk of role A there, half the people sort of felt heard and sort of felt satisfied with the conversation. It's because this is where the level of listening skill is at for the majority of people that are out there. So an example of what subjective listening looks like. So speaker, I can't believe Henry was upset with me for not having this assignment completed on time, given he never communicated a due date to us. I was so shocked I completely tuned out and missed what he said the last 5 minutes of the meeting. Listener, I know what you mean. I was dumbfounded when he yelled at me too. So who is the listener focused on in their response?
Himself.
Yeah, themselves. So that is what is meant by listening is based on the agenda or needs of the listener. They're turning it back on themselves. Who do we want to be focused on when we're listening? Yeah, Pepe's pointing the other way.
The speaker.
Exactly. We want to be focused on the speaker. So the first indication you're doing subjective listening, you're starting your sentences with I and talking about me and I. Okay. Questions, comments on level 1 listening before I go to level 2?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm sorry. What if you're just trying to reinforce you understand what the speaker is saying?
So if you are trying to reinforce you understand what the speaker is saying, you can paraphrase what the speaker is saying without talking about yourself.
Right. And
But-
what if you have no clue what they're saying?
Oh, so if you don't, what would be a thing to say if you don't have a clue what they're saying?
Yeah. I don't
What-
understand.
You could
Which
say
goes
I
back to
don't
me.
understand. You could say I don't understand. You could say I'm sorry. I'm having trouble understanding what it is you're trying to say. Can you yeah, exactly. So Maria, that's exactly where I was going. Can you explain this a different way?
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Any other questions, comments on level 1 before I move to level 2? So Lori's asking, could this example be a way of empathizing, as in this happened to me too? So this is an excellent question. A lot of people think that sharing that kind of phrasing is demonstrating empathy for the other person. It's actually not as effective to empathize with them by turning it on to you. So we're actually going to talk a little bit later as we go into this, a better way to empathize with people where they still feel empathized with, yet we're keeping the focus on them instead of bringing it back to us. Great question, Lori. Yes, yeah, so good example, Sherry. Sorry guys, I'm just reading the chat here. Yep, so Sherry's example, I'm having trouble. Can you explain this a different way or will you clarify? Yep. Okay, any other questions, comments on level 1 before I go to level 2?
In level 1, it's sort of as though you're acting as your own attorney. And I assume that in a higher level, you're listening as though you're the other party's attorney.
That is an interesting way to put it. I've not thought about it that way before. So say more what you mean by listening to it like you're their attorney.
So in order to force yourself to really understand what they're saying, you can try to make their argument on their behalf. You can either do that in your own head to help you really get into what their point is, or you can do it out loud and have them verify that, yes, that was what they were trying to say, and you're arguing it for them.
So you could potentially look at it that way. You just want to be careful about being in your head too much and not being present to the conversation. So you're absolutely correct in wanting to confirm your understanding of what the person's saying by having that exchange with them. If you're thinking it through from an argument standpoint, I would caution there about not being present enough to what they're really saying to be able to hear them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but my point was that confirming that you understood correctly was just a desirable byproduct. The main point was to really be sure that you are listening and not just preparing to reply. And the way you can do that is to basically take on their position.
It's an interesting way to look at it. Let's chat a little more about that afterwards. So we want to make sure we get to the other levels here. And I'm getting a time check from Pepe here. So let's keep moving and table that thought a little bit. Okay, so level 2, let's talk about level 2. So level 2 is called objective listening. So this listening is completely focused on the other person speaking with no thoughts about how any of the information relates personally or professionally to you. So now our attention's really focused on the other person. This level of listening is much more effective than subjective listening. So if we go to the same example, right? Exact same one I just talked about, speaker, I can't believe Henry was upset with me for not having the assignment completed on time when he never communicated a due date to us. I was so shocked I completely tuned out and missed what he said the last 5 minutes of the meeting. What could be an example of a level 2 listening response?
Telling them what they missed.
So telling them what they missed. Okay. What else could be a example?
I always like to ask a question instead of make a statement when I'm the listener. So, you know, telling them at what point, trying to find out when they were shocked. I guess they were shocked. It sounds like after they got yelled at, but I don't want to make that assumption. So I might say, am I correct in understanding that you're saying that you were so shocked with being yelled at that that's when you tuned out? Because I don't know if they tuned out and then there was a due date and I heard it, but that was the last 5 minutes of the meeting.
Okay, Marla, so you said a really key thing there. I don't want to make an assumption. And that's really, really big, folks, when we're listening, is so many times people are inadvertently making an assumption when they go to respond. So in the example that was given the first time around, telling them what they missed, the person speaking may or may not want to know what they missed in the meeting, right? So an assumption was made there that they're going to want to hear what they missed in the meeting. And that may or may not be what the person's looking for in sharing this with you, right? If we think back to why listening matters, they may just be looking to vent, Or they may be looking to find out, am I the only one who wasn't told a due date? Am I imagining things? There could be multiple things going on here. So really good point you made there, Marla. Thank you. So another example of level 2 listening could be, sounds like the meeting didn't go as you had expected. What would you have liked to have said to Henry in the meeting had you not been so shocked? Okay, so it's reflecting back to the person what they are experiencing, right? Confirming understanding. And as Marla said, asking a clarifying question to find out more. And even in this example that I put here, right, I could ask, you know, would you like to explore what you would have liked to have said to Henry in the meeting had you not been so shocked? To even double check on that before I go into that. Okay, so level 2 is really about reflecting back to the speaker what it is you're hearing from them. Questions or comments on level 2 before we go practice some of this? So let's see, Elizabeth, but they're not clear in their communication. Should we let them perpetuate the same mistake that they made in the first, please? Elizabeth, I'm not sure I understand your question. What do you mean by mistake they made in the first?
It sounds like initially they did not understand that they weren't listening and they didn't hear that there was a due date, right?
Well, is that what happened?
She tuned out when she felt like Henry yelled at her because she didn't do what she was supposed to do. But she didn't, it sounds like she didn't know that there was a date for what she was supposed to do, right?
From her perspective, there was never a due date communicated.
Okay, all right. No problem. Never mind.
Now, do we know she missed a due date was communicated to her? We don't know from this, right?
Okay, no problem. I don't have a question then.
Okay. Yep, so that's a good question, Elizabeth, again, because we want to be clear about what is it we truly know and what is it we truly don't know. Because unless we have been specifically been told or have facts in front of us, we're unfortunately making assumptions. And this is something that people do so very much in business. I can't tell you the number of times I've had to go in and get departments working together who've been in conflict for ages. And it's all because of misunderstandings typically and assumptions that were made. So this is a really, really, really big thing to be aware of is, have I made an assumption or do I really know for a fact this is what's going on? It's a really good point. Any other questions on level 2 before I move on?
I like that. I like that example of listener response. If someone responded to me that way, I must say I would be taken aback, but it was so thoughtful that they were focused on me and not on whatever I did wrong, you know.
Exactly. It feels very different, doesn't it? Receiving that kind of response. Yep. And we're showing that respect by truly focusing on them. Okay, anything else before we move into practicing? All right, so second time around, guys, we're going to be put into the same breakout rooms for 7 minutes this time. For the first minute, each person take half a minute to provide feedback on your partner's listening in exercise 1. So remember, we're here to help each other improve. So be kind, be respectful with your feedback, and be honest, right? We want people to be able to know how it is they're doing with their listening, because this is how we're then able to improve. Once you've done that, you're going to reverse the roles from exercise 1. So if you were role A in exercise 1, you're now going to become role B. Role B, you're going to become role A. Okay. Role A, same thing we did in exercise 1. You're going to choose a work situation this time where you're frustrated with someone, avoid sharing any background, and have the conversation with role B to resolve the frustration, just like it's the person you're frustrated with. And role B, once again, your job's going to be to role play with role A. And this time, be aware when you're responding, whether you're focusing on your partner or yourself, and whether you're thinking about how the info being shared pertains to you. Okay. And Sherry, yes, I am going to copy the exercise into the chat so that you guys have that. Okay, so that is in the chat now, folks. Any questions on exercise 2 before we go into the breakout rooms?
I assume you know that when we go to the breakout room, we will no longer be able to see the chat.
So
you can.
But you can copy it now and then paste it in the next.
Yeah, that's true. I can do that.
Oh, David, are you so the chat history we have here, you won't be able to see in the breakout rooms?
Yeah.
Right. It's the main room chat,
Oh.
and it will be visible when we're in the main room.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, David. I did not realize that, so I stand corrected. So yes, as Pepe said, if you can copy it into a document or a note that you have on your screen.
Or just to the clipboard, and then when you join the breakout session, you can paste it.
Yep.
So
Thank you,
I'm
David,
gonna
for saying that. Okay, any other questions before we go into the breakout rooms? All right, with that, Pepe, if you can put us back in, have a great
Yes,
have a great
yes, and there are at least 2 individuals who were solo, and I'm gonna work on pairing them so that everybody has a good experience. Okay, so
Okay, great. Thank you, Pepe.
Rooms are opening now. Have fun.
Okay, so now that everybody has had a chance to practice again, we're going to go back and do another poll. So that ought to be up on your screen. And this time again, there's 5 questions. So scroll down once you're done with question 2. And once again, for whatever role, if the question's about role A, you're going to mark not applicable for role B. Okay, so as you can see, this time around, role A felt a lot more heard and satisfied with the conversation than they did in exercise 1. Remember, it was about half and half between sort of and yes in exercise 1. This time around, 42% said yes, only 8% said sort of, and there was still a little bit saying no. And if we go down to role B, there's also a shift in the percentage here. So higher percentage said yes, they felt heard and satisfied with the conversation, still some sort ofs, and still 1 no. So we're definitely moving here in feeling more heard and more satisfied with the conversation. As far as keeping the conversation focused on you, there's a higher percentage here as well. Still a bit turning the conversation to themselves, so be aware on that piece. And as far as role B, did they find their thoughts wandering during the conversation? So 16% said yes, 37% said no. Okay, so some people recognize there, oh, it's a little bit hard to keep that focus on the speaker. And then as far as role B finding themselves thinking about how the information being shared related to them, so 29% said yes and 26% said no. So comments on what you're seeing in the second poll from exercise 2. Anything here that surprises you?
I'm surprised that not more people in role B confess to thoughts wandering, because I literally had that. I realized I did it. Like I was very in the moment. Oh, well, there goes my thought, and come back. You know, I had to very actively refocus. Sorry, Dawn.
Thank you for being honest, and that's very normal. So, right, we're not necessarily trained how to listen. It's not like we have this being taught in our schools necessarily growing up. So it's very normal to have those thoughts wandering.
Yeah,
And thank
I
you
knew
for
she
being
was doing
honest. Sorry, Don?
And I knew she was doing that. but it was okay because it was like we had very similar experiences. So I didn't feel like she was deflecting it to her. I thought it was a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, well, this is a place you're practicing as well and becoming aware of it. So absolutely. Yep. And Sylvia says, we've improved. Yes, absolutely. With awareness and practice, we can always improve. Any other comments before we move on?
Well, it's also hard too, because you can focus on that person and focus and focus and focus, but you still have to do a response. So at some point you have to think about what your response is going to be. And if this isn't coming natural to us, so we really have to think hard about that response, it's going to be like, you know, if the other person doesn't pause for a moment and like let you gather your thoughts, it's going to be very difficult to do this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if you're not used to doing this. It's a different way of being with other people. And you're absolutely correct. When you first start doing this, it's kind of this like splitting the mental that's going on up in your brain of, okay, I want to listen, but I'm also going to have to respond at some point. Yeah, absolutely. Sasha, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering do you feel like now that we're all digital, it sort of makes it even more difficult because you don't get a lot of people don't even want to get on screen when they talk to you. So you have to like not only listen, but you also really have to listen because it's audio now. You miss sort of the whole body language and all the cues and everything.
Yes, really good point. So it depends on the listener as far as their level of listening. Certain people can hear a lot of it from the tone of voice. So if the visual's not on the screen, they're still being able to pick up most of it. For those of us who are still learning to do these other levels of listening, it can definitely be harder virtual if the person's not on video. A huge part of our communication is nonverbal. So absolutely, it can be more challenging on the virtual. And Monwai, I see your hands up, and Kevin, I see your hand is up. Unfortunately, from a time check here, I'm going to have to keep moving. I'll be on a bit after we finish up those so we can cover those questions then. All right, so let me move this out of the way and share my screen again. All right, everybody's able to see my screen, correct? Okay, good. See thumbs up. Okay, so now let's talk about the last level of listening, which is level 3, intuitive listening. Okay, so this level of listening, the attention is completely focused on the speaker in addition to how the speaker is saying the message. So it's paying attention to the tone of voice, their energy level, their feelings, their facial expression. It's taking in all the sensory components and connecting to the real message of what the person's saying. And the person speaking feels completely understood when we're able to do this level of listening. And a lot of times the person is so appreciative because it's so rare they're able to experience this kind of listening. So same example that we were talking about previously. So the speaker, I can't believe Henry was upset with me for not having the assignment completed on time when he never communicated a due date to us. I was so shocked I completely tuned out and missed what he said the last 5 minutes of the meeting. So a level 3 response could be, sounds like Henry really took you by surprise in the meeting, and you're frustrated at a few things. One, frustration's with Henry for failing to take accountability for never communicating a due date. And the other frustration is you missed out on what was discussed the last 5 minutes of the meeting. That's really frustrating. So what am I expressing with my tone and words as the listener?
Empathy.
Yes, absolutely. Empathy. So expressing empathy is, again, key to listening, right? It's saying, I see you, I feel you, I hear you. It's allowing that person to be fully seen. And this can be huge in building relationships.
Yeah.
So questions on level 3 before we go practice it.
So in this response, you're basically agreeing with the speaker that Henry didn't communicate a due date. It seems to me that, you know, the empathy is good, the understanding is good, understanding the feelings are right, understanding that the speaker feels that a due date was not communicated is all good, but I would not agree that a due date has not been communicated unless I knew that through some other source.
So I'm not going to be able to go into this in depth at the moment, given the time, but something to think about, David, is how does the listener, from this example, how do you know the listener agrees with what the speaker's saying? So don't answer it just now, but think about that question. So from the example, how does the listener know, or how do you know the listener agrees with the speaker? Something to think about.
Rosanne, I don't know if you noticed that Sasha and Sherry have their hand raised, and if you have addressed the question.
I did not see it. Thank you, Pepe, for saying it. So Sasha, go ahead.
Sorry, I never took my hand down.
Sherry?
Sherry just didn't speak.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have a question or an observation. So it obviously, yes, it's important to hear, or notice and take into account the body language, but isn't it also incumbent on the speaker to understand how they are speaking, right? In other words, be aware of your own body language when you're trying to convey something to someone so that they can hear you effectively.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. As a speaker, you want to be aware of your body language because that can certainly be conveying a message. Absolutely, Don.
Can I just ask or make a comment? I don't think that the listener actually says that they agree with the speaker. I think the listener is saying they understand how the speaker is feeling.
Well done, Elizabeth. You are correct. They never actually say they agree with the speaker. They're simply saying, I can understand you're feeling this. Very well done, Elizabeth. All right, guys, I know, and Munwai, I'm sorry, this is the second time I've had to cut you, and I'm sorry about that. You can certainly contact me after with your question and I can answer, but I want to be respectful to Pepe here on the time. So
Roseanne, do you see Sherry's question in the chat?
I did not.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do, is to ask Sherry's question out loud. That's all.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you, Munwai. This didn't happen in breakout, but how do you get back on track if a speaker brings up topic A, you as listener goes to topic B, which is when speaker goes to topic B. When do you go to topic B? Speaker goes to topic C. Speaker brings up topic A. So Sherry, in that example that you gave, that's just going to end up in a spiral where nobody's issue is resolved because it's constantly jumping to another topic. So in that example where you say listener goes to, oh, sorry, hold on. This listener goes to topic A, which is when speaker goes, oh, the speaker's jumping. I'm sorry, I misread this initially. If the speaker is jumping topics, then what I would do in that example is to say, it sounds like you're jumping to a different topic. Do you want to move to that topic, or do you want to go back and finish the topic we were just discussing? Does that answer your question, Sherry? Yes, thanks. Okay. All right. With that, Pepe, I know we're getting on our time here. Do you still want to go into another breakout room, or you want to skip the third exercise so that we finish relatively close?
I would say that we can do the exercise, and for those who become unavailable and they need to leave, we'll deal.
Okay.
It is really up to the audience. If they stay, I would assume, not that I don't want to ask the question, but I would assume that they want to participate and finish the exercise.
I wonder if we could see an example of this higher level of listening, like all of us, see a model of it, and maybe that would save on time.
Meaning in the group?
Yeah.
If someone wants to, well, so some people are saying skip to go to content, and some people are saying to see a sample here. So I think I'm seeing more go to content in the chat. If people have a preference, otherwise, please speak up now.
Content.
Okay. All right, content. So with that, let me skip exercise 3. So exercise 3, folks, was just going back and repeating it and giving you the opportunity to practice level 3. So even if we don't practice it tonight in this session, you can practice this with your spouse. You can practice this with your coworker. There's ample opportunities to listen outside of this meeting to practice these things. And the other thing to say on level 3, guys, this level of listening typically takes a lot of practice. It's not something most people can do overnight. So again, how we get good at things is practice. Okay, so don't beat yourself up if you can't do this right away. That's pretty normal. Okay, so that's level 3. The exercise for level 3 was just practicing more of it, like I said. So now let's summarize what is listening. So now that you've been through 3 levels of listening and practiced it, how would you summarize what listening is?
Being mindful.
Yes, definitely being mindful. Good. What else?
Respectful, empathetic.
Yes, empathy, respect,
Being present.
focused. Yes, Elizabeth, being present. Ooh, Diane, it's selfless. Very good. Sylvia, yes, understand.
Very active.
Yes, very active. Focusing on the speaker as people are putting into the chat.
Wondering if listening should or could be goal oriented. You touched on that before when you said that sometimes someone just wants to be heard, but other times you're trying to resolve a frustration. And to me, those are 2 very different goals. And so is it goal oriented, or maybe the answer is sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't?
I think it depends on the person, how they're looking at it. I personally don't ever look at it as goal oriented. I personally look at it as, what is this person trying to convey to me? And am I getting their message? So you could look at it as goal oriented. And as you say, the goal could be different depending on the conversation and the person. So it's important to, so what do we do to find out what the goal is of the speaker as the listener?
Yeah, could I add something to that just for a sec?
Is it answering the question or something else?
Yes, no, it's a
Yeah,
part
yeah,
of the,
go for it, Joel.
yeah. No, it was really to follow on your point is maybe to take the other side of if we're not listening clearly and we're not actually hearing what the other person is trying to say, how likely are we going to accomplish any goal? So it's really, it is on the path to accomplishing the goal, but maybe to address your question, if you're listening with the goal as the primary directive, you're probably not going to hear very well because you're going to blank out the things that don't match your goal. Whereas this is, let's really hear the other side so we can do whatever it is we're trying to do. Does that help?
It's something to think about. How do we as the listener, circling back to the question, how do we as the listener figure out the goal of the speaker?
Exactly that. Yes. And even if you do all these things, it's still challenging, right?
Well, nobody's actually, I haven't heard yet. There we go, Bernadette. I was going to say, no one said yet. We want to ask clarifying questions, guys. If we're not sure what the speaker's looking for from us, let's ask, right? How can I help? Is a great response when someone is sharing. Because many times they'll say, oh, there isn't really anything. I just needed to vent. Well, now we know what the goal is because we've asked. So part of listening is asking clarifying questions. Okay, so summing up what listening is, it's the ability to accurately receive and interpret messages in the communication process, right? Just because we're hearing things doesn't mean we've accurately received and interpreted the message correctly. So we want to be asking questions and paraphrasing back so that we know we actually did receive the message correctly. And as other people said, it's being present, giving your attention to the person speaking. And it's paying attention to not only their words, but their tone of voice, their facial expressions. It's being open-minded and understanding rather than judging. A lot of times when people are sharing something with us, we go into judgment mode. As you guys have already said, it's definitely a tool of and key to empathy. It's avoiding interrupting someone. It can be very tempting to do this, especially when you're like, oh, there's something here that'd be really helpful with this. Avoid interrupting. You want to be able to hear what they're saying. And as I said, it's asking clarifying questions and seeking suggestions as well. And as Diane had put it, so listening's an art, guys. It requires attention over talent, spirit over ego, and others over self. So as Diane put it, it's a selfless thing to do to listen if we're really, really listening well. Questions, comments on this before I wrap up? Okay. All right. So now that you've had a chance to practice, you've heard the different levels of listening, what are the top 2 things you learned tonight? Nobody wants to share? There we go. Yes, Kara, assumptions are deadly. Good. How to focus on the other person, needing to practice this more. Yeah, Marla, don't rush to solve. Yeah, focus. Yes, Monwai, very good. True listening takes a lot of energy. Yes, it does. Very, very good observation. Not rushing, making sure you have time. Good, good. Yeah, it takes time to be skilled at it. Hey, I like it, Michael. I can do this. Good. Clarifying. Yep. Offering to help. Good, good. All right, so lots of different things tonight. Now think about, what do you want to start doing based on what you learned tonight? Ooh, very nice, Sylvia. Practice mindfully. Practice, yeah. Focus, good. Pick a level and stick to it. Be present, good. Focusing more on the speaker, excellent. Being patient, that's a great one, Glenn. Yep, practice in every place, yep. Whole worlds of practice. Being more attentive, good, good. Ooh, excellent, Barbara. Pause before responding. Yeah, that's great. Yep, definitely, David. Okay, and what do you want to stop doing?
Stop shooting from the hip.
Excellent. Ooh, excellent, guys. Multitasking, half-baked listening, thinking about the next thing I'm going to say. I refer to that as the chess game. It's like as the person's talking, you're thinking the next few moves ahead. Good, Sylvia. Jumping to conclusions. Yeah. Good. Refrain from relating to myself. Yeah. Good. Sharing similar experiences, way to be empathetic. Yep. Ooh, excellent, Lauren. Trying to fix it for the other person. Great observation there, because they may not want it to be fixed. Excellent. All right, guys. So great awarenesses there. So reach out if you have any additional questions or if you're struggling with listening. You can reach me on LinkedIn. You can also contact me via phone or email. I'll put this information in the chat as well. And if anybody is interested in more tips, you're welcome to sign up for my monthly newsletter. The website's there. There's also a free monthly change agent community call that I hold. Some of you from there are on this evening. You are all change agents. You're more than welcome to attend. Funny enough, the next call is November 16th, 4 p.m. And the topic is listening more than talking. And no, I did not give it to them. They asked for that topic. So if you would like to practice more or learn more tips, you're welcome to join that call. And with that, thank you for having me. And please take time to fill out the feedback form from Agile New England.
Thank you very much. Very good.